everyone, Sam Shire here, founder of Wall Street Mastermind. Super excited to be back today with another client interview for you guys. And today I'm really excited to have Keira on with us. And Keira is someone that we've been working with for it's a little under 2 months, actually. It hasn't been that long, but
Yeah.
which is always great when we're able to say that because it just means that they were able to get results very, very quickly. But long story short, she just recently finished going through the summer 2026 recruiting process and was able to end up with a very, very good outcome. And so I wanted to get her on here to just kind of talk to you guys about what her process looks like and how she was able to overcome all the obstacles that she had to overcome along the way. And, hopefully along the way, just give you guys some inspiration to your own recruiting process as well. And I guess there's a parade going on outside New York City right now. So if you hear weird music in the background, that's what that is. Okay. But regardless, here, thank you for taking the time to be here with us today. And if you don't mind, maybe start things off for us by just introducing yourself real quick and kind of giving our audience a sense of who you are.
Yeah. Happy to be here. Happy to share anything that might be helpful. So I'm currently a second year at the University of Chicago, but actually had like a little bit of an interesting story. So I'm a transfer from UC Davis, where the past 2 years I played Division One golf. So technically I should have been a third year, but just the way that course credits rolled out and in terms of like the IB recruiting timeline, I chose to, I guess, have an extra year of school. And growing up, I'm from originally from California. Both of my parents were initially investment bankers, so I got to hear a little bit of the industry, but definitely felt really lost. Was, I guess, prior to Wall Street Mastermind, trying to get into banking, but not really sure, like, had no clue what to do with technicals. Um, Interviews were generally, I would say, like a hot mess. Um, and I would say Wall Street Mastermind really helped me with just like accelerating the process because already I felt like it was January. It was kind of like the heat of recruiting and kind of being able to have like that structured opportunity of like going through the specific steps from like networking, how to structure your behavioral answers, practicing technicals, and all of just the resources was helpful throughout the process.
Yeah, that's awesome. Um, so your parents are both investment bankers. Like that's like what they did for their entire careers, or did they start in banking and then exit to other things, or
Hmm. Yeah, they both initially started. So my mom was at Morgan Stanley. She was kind of in like restructuring and she's kind of followed that path. Now she's at MUFG. She works like in leverage loans. And then my dad also started investment banking, but also left. And now he's in private equity.
okay, gotcha. Wow, so they're both lifers really in life finance.
Yeah.
How do they even have time to date each other?
That's a good question. Um, I think they actually initially met in Hong Kong. They were both, I think, at Peregrine, and I think that's how that happened. And
Wait,
from there, who knows?
what's peregrine? I'm not familiar. What does that mean?
They're now under a different name that I forget, but they're just both working.
Oh,
Um,
like they worked at the same firm, you're saying.
yeah.
Ah, okay. All right. Office romance. That's cool. So then like when you were growing up then like were I imagine they were super busy then. Like like how did you like what was that like for you, I guess? Like did you not get to see them that much then or like how do they
Yeah.
balance people always out and I'm sure a lot of people in our audience are wondering like, work-life balance, work like that's always one of the things that people are the most worried about, right? Especially if they want to have a family someday. So I mean obviously you turned out perfectly fine, but like what was that like growing up?
Yeah, I would say I remember as a kid, I didn't see them that often. I was lucky that like my grandma would help out in taking care of us, and then we also kind of had like a nanny, or I think we like cycled through three nannies. I don't know if I was like a terrible child or like they just didn't want to stay that long. And so I definitely didn't see my mom as much. And I actually like recently talked with her about this, and I guess she kind of regrets the time. It's definitely a trade-off. I grew up very comfortable, I would say, and like I don't think I would trade anything for it, but I maybe didn't see them as much as either of us would have liked. But then I guess with my dad, like I was able to have a pretty close relationship just like through golf. He would always take the time to like drive me to tournaments, and that meant a lot of times like in the background I could hear him like on a call. Uh, but I guess we made it work and I turned out relatively okay. So
Well, I'm pretty sure the nanny thing is not your fault because I've had lots of nannies myself. Not like as a kid, but as a dad, I've hired lots of nannies to help with my kids. And sometimes you just have to cycle through a few of them to find the right one because um, some of them just aren't very good. I don't know.
yeah.
I don't know how to put that in like a more nice way, but some of them are just not very good. So, and when it comes to like taking care of your kid, which is like, probably the most important, in a way, it's the most important employee you could hire, right? You just, the bar is pretty high, I would say, for most people. So, definitely don't think that's your fault, but that's awesome. So, like, obviously, you got really good at golf because you ended up playing D1, which is quite the accomplishment and not easy to do. And so
Yeah.
just like your dad just got you into golf from like a very young age, and you just started. Like, when did you start playing? And was that like a? I imagine you probably spent a ton of time playing then all throughout like your childhood and high school. And like, what does it take to get to the D1 level, I guess?
Yeah, absolutely. I started at 9 and it started out as something we could all do as a family. And then everyone was like, oh, this is super boring. And so I was the only one who really stuck out with it. And I would say to get to that level, it definitely takes a lot of commitment, a lot of sacrifice, and a little bit of luck too. It's super, super competitive. Every single weekend I would be going to tournaments. I would sometimes leave school early on Friday just to drive out there, like wherever it would be. We'd middle of nowhere, Beaumont, California. Um, and every single day after school, I would be practicing, or our high school actually had late start Wednesdays, so I'd wake up early and go out to the course before school.
Um,
Um,
you guys had your own course in high school?
no, we didn't, but I was just like, I would just drive out before class to go there.
Gonna say, like, that's a pretty nice high school. Have your course. That's cool. Okay. So then, and then your dad would be the one taking you to tournaments every weekend. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, that's dedication. I mean,
Yeah.
but I think that is really what it takes for if you really want your child to not just be like above average or something, but like really excel at it, like I would say being D1 level is athlete is excelling. So that's it's pretty awesome. So I guess like one more question on this, and then we'll dive into the recruiting stuff. But because I'm sure people are wondering about that. But what made you? Because then you left UC Davis to come to Chicago, so I assume that means like you had to give up playing D1 golf when you did that. So
Yeah.
like, was the goal originally to like go pro and play golf, and then like at what point did you kind of or what caused you to change your mind, I guess? And then like now obviously you're on this like finance investment banking path, same path that your parents were on, but like what made you kind of make that switch?
Yeah, it's kind of ironic how it works out where now I'm like following my parents' footsteps again. But I think so going into college from high school, I really loved golf. I was committed to playing golf. And when I had the opportunity to play Division 1 golf, I wanted to do that. I wasn't sure if I necessarily wanted to go pro, but I wanted the experience since I felt like it was such like a unique experience. Not a lot of people get to do that, and I couldn't pass up on the opportunity. And then kind of 2 years in, well, in part, I had my internship at Riviera and I really enjoyed that. I was like, okay, maybe I want to start a career in finance. And so I'd always, prior to that, I was really interested in Chicago, but they just didn't have a formal golf team. And then so I was like, okay, I know I don't want to play professionally and I want to pursue finance. Chicago is probably one of the best places to do that. And I decided that I wanted to try to transfer. I got in and I've had 2 full quarters now. I've really enjoyed it. I think for one, it's I didn't like quite under like I kind of underestimated how much of like an impact just I guess the name and the alum really brings to like getting job opportunities. Like as I mentioned before I joined Wall Street Mastermind, I was getting interviews and I think part of that was just like through like Chicago, the Chicago name. And I wasn't necessarily prepared, but I got the interviews. Um So I think that's been a good experience. And then the second part is just like the core. So being able to take a bunch of other classes outside of just your major was something that was interesting.
Yeah, for sure. Gotcha. Okay. It's awesome. I mean, super interesting background that you have, obviously. So, I guess diving into recruiting a little bit then. I mean, first things first, people always want to know, but like what was the outcome of your recruiting process? I guess like what offer or offers did you end up with? And maybe we can start there.
Yeah. So I got an offer from Bank of America for their tech team in Palo Alto, and I ended up signing there. I was in a couple other processes, but I hadn't received any other formal offers for anywhere else. So
And so you just turned down those processes. Like
yeah,
you were happy with this offer. You're like, I'm just gonna take it, I'm gonna stop recruiting. Yeah, okay.
yeah.
That's great. Who were the first people you told when you got the offer?
I first called my parents, like I joint called them. And then I actually texted you guys like in the Slack channel.
Um, um, what did your parents say? Or what was their reaction, I guess?
So both of them were like congratulations, but then my mom wasted no time of being like okay, now you gotta like really prepare. She's like, I don't think I was a good analyst. Like I want to spend the next like year and a half like telling you what sh like helping you prepare or something.
Oh God. Is your mom a tiger mom?
Um, I think on like in terms of like the Asian parents, she's not as bad as like the end spectrum could be, but she's definitely not like the most relaxed, I would say.
Sure. Yeah, it could always be worse and it could always be better, right?
Yeah.
Gotcha. That's funny. I definitely get it, it's like that meme with the Asian dad. Like what is that one? Like the one where it's like they're never happy because like you only got an A minus or something. Like
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
okay, no, that's awesome. So what did that I guess like what did getting that offer feel like? Like when it happened, when you got the call from B of A, like what was that feeling like? Or
It,
how did you react, I guess?
yeah, so it was kind of really funny. So I got like a call from this number that I didn't know, and I was like, I looked at like the area code, and I was like, oh, San Jose. I was like, maybe I should pick this up. And then and then he was like, hello, this is like Andrew, like I'm the head of recruiting at Bank of America. I have some exciting news for you. And I was just like, I was like in part like I was in shock, but also it was just like really like relieving and very rewarding because it's like you put in so much like effort and like you really hope to get an offer, but it's such like a competitive industry, like, oh, I don't know if this is gonna work out. And so like when it finally did, I was like, oh, I'm like so relieved. I was so happy.
Yeah.
Um, and I mean, I guess like at that point I was like a little bit in shock too. 'Cause
Yeah.
I didn't really expect it. It was just like a Friday morning and I was like studying for finals.
Did you not expect it because you didn't feel like the interview went well, or like you just like what do you mean by that?
Yeah, so I I don't know like what exactly happened. So like the typical process is like you have like the higher view and then you have the super day. So I had the higher view, I had the super day back in April or sorry, back in February, like early February-ish. And then I think like I I thought like the super day went okay, but I felt like it could have went better. And then I was on the wait list for a little bit and then I got an email and it was like, oh, like we want you to do a couple of coffee chats with like these two analysts, like set it up. And I was like,
Or-
interesting. And then so that Wednesday I had two coffee chats with the analyst and I told my dad, I was like, I feel like the term coffee chat was kind of a little bit of a like a wolf in a sheep's clothing because it felt more like an interview than it did like a coffee chat.
Yeah.
But I felt like those went relatively well. So I was hopeful about that day
We
happening.
told you to treat it like an interview, right? We did
Yeah.
tell you. Okay.
Yeah. So I was glad I was prepared for it like an interview, but
I was like, I remember this conversation now that you mentioned it. I was like, oh yeah, you asked us about this coffee chat, which is kind of unusual. And then we were just like, oh, just treat it like an interview. It's an interview.
yeah.
Um, so what, the analyst just like grilled you again, basically?
There
Like
was no technicals, but they were just like, yeah, they were just like, why are you interested in Bank of America? Like, why are you interested in tech? Um, like,
questions that they've all asked you already.
yeah, exactly.
Interesting. Yeah. I've had like not like the exact same thing, obviously, but it wasn't for banking, but when I was leaving private equity to go to Square, I was interviewing with their financial strategy team, and then I finished all the interviews, and I guess the head of the team was kind of like on the fence about me. So then he like made me go through another round
Oh
with him,
wow.
I think basically, and then he was asking all sorts of like really kind of like curveball questions, like. I don't know, the one that I remember, because this is many years ago now, obviously, but I still remember this. He's like, so, on a scale of 1 to 5, if 5 means you're like really smart, and then 1 means you're like really hardworking, like, how would you rate yourself? I was like, I don't know. I don't remember what I said, but I was like, I don't know what the right answer is. There's no right answer, really, I think,
Yeah.
but there's like tricky questions like that where after the interview I left, I was like, I have no idea how I did. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know if he liked my answer or not. Obviously, I got the job in the end, but yeah, I feel like sometimes. My guess is they were like probably having like a fierce debate in the office about you and one other person on the wait list, and then they had to like make a decision, and this is kind of like the tiebreaker. So,
Yeah.
um, but that's awesome. So, okay, you get this job. You're in shock. It's super relieving, obviously super rewarding, because you worked super hard for it. Um, let's talk about kind of like the journey to get there then. So, because you didn't really, like I said, start working with us until like late January. So that was like less than 2 months ago because we were recording this in like mid-March.
Yeah.
Um, prior to that, obviously, you had already done a private equity internship, um, before, and you're also in the I think you also founded like a investment club on campus, right? So like you already knew you want to do banking, I'm assuming. And so like what were some of the things aside from like the internship and kind of starting a club, like what were some of the other things that you were already doing on your own even before kind of working with us?
Yeah. So I would say when I initially joined Chicago, I was just going to a bunch of like informational events. They had this thing called Night on Wall Street, and there I was able to speak to like a bunch of bankers. Um, and as I mentioned, like I was just applying to a bunch of different things. I like even like just beyond investment banking, um, like things in like private credit or um,
Hmm.
like a bunch of random things and just getting interviews. Um, and I like would say
Was that for junior summer or for sophomore summer or?
it was so back in fall, it was initially for junior summer. That was before like I was still like, oh, like, like on the cusp of like 26 and 27 graduation date.
Yeah, yeah.
And then yeah, I was doing networking calls. That was also horrific. I remember like I was actually like somehow like I was able to get a networking call with like a partner at Goldman in like equities research, and I was so naive and I thought it was like gonna be okay, and she like ended up like it felt more of like an interview where she was like grilling me and she's like, "Oh, like tell me about this like specific deal at like that you did at Riviera," and
Yeah.
it's like, "Oh wow." But
Okay.
yeah, I was doing interviews. I was trying to like network with people, either just like through cold outreach, or again, I was really fortunate from like my parents' side where they had known a couple people and they were able to put me in touch through that. Um, and then the technicals, I would say, was probably like the worst part where like everyone was just like, oh, like look at like the 400 questions, and I would like read through that. I'm like, I don't really understand any of this. And like I feel like I would go in like I would read it and then I would just forget immediately everything that I had read.
Yeah, for sure. Um, so I guess you basically because prior to transferring, then you were gonna graduate in 2025, I guess, and so you already went through the summer recruiting process one time, and
Oh,
then is that what you're saying?
well,
Or
yeah, like 2026, and I had gone through, I guess like I hadn't interviewed for any investment banks in the fall, but yeah, I was interviewing for this summer thing.
yeah,
So I had gone through, I guess, like somewhat of a process.
yeah, gotcha. Okay, and then like just nothing panned out, basically. Like it just
Yeah.
yeah, because like you were getting sounded like you were getting some interviews, but you couldn't really do the technicals. at least just based on using the guides to self-study, like that wasn't really clicking for you. Um, and it sounds like the networking calls were also pretty challenging, because you just, I guess, weren't quite prepared for them. Uh,
Yeah.
the more hardcore bank, I mean, you know this now, obviously in hindsight, but just for the benefit of everyone else who's listening to this, like, yeah, we always tell our students sometimes, depends on the banker that you end up getting on with. Like, if they're a little bit more hardcore, some of them will turn the networking call into more of like a interview. And I think it's kind of a double-edged sword because for people like that, a lot of times they're doing that to test you, and then if you can pass the test, they'll be a lot more likely to help you than like the average banker. But also like the call itself is obviously way more stressful than just like a casual networking call, right? But a lot of times also those casual networking calls are less likely to go anywhere because maybe you just had small talk or chit chat the whole time. It's not really meaningful, right? But nonetheless, like it's always good to be prepared prior to going into these. It's not always possible, but we tell people like, especially the people that start early enough, it's like even if you're a freshman right now and you know you're gonna have to recruit sophomore year, and maybe it's too early for you to be networking now as a freshman. But if you start doing the interview prep and you start polishing your behavioral stories, you start learning your technicals, such that by sophomore year, when you actually start having these calls, you already know how to answer these questions. Then even when you run into these situations, you're going to be prepared, and that would be like the best case scenario, right?
Yeah.
Um, Okay, so you do all these things, and then obviously in January, you decided to join Wall Street Mastermind. So like, I guess one question I have is like, what made you want to join Wall Street Mastermind? Why not just keep doing whatever it is you were doing, or and specifically for you, like I'm sure people are wondering like, oh, so like your parents both did banking, like why don't they just help you? Like why not? Like why work with someone like Wall Street Mastermind? Like how did you? And obviously your parents are a part of this decision as well. So like, how did you guys kind of think about this whole process? I guess.
Yeah. So it was like at that point in January, I had gotten interviews, but I hadn't really panned out to anything. And then also it was like at that moment I decided I would like seriously wanted to do investment banking. So I was like, okay, I want to do everything that I can in my power to, I mean, nothing's ever a guarantee, right? But I wanted to do everything in my power to put myself in the best position. And I think one of the best things that really attracted me to Wall Street Mastermind was the ability to have something that was like structured, right? Like I wanted something like where I was like, okay, like I know what I should be doing at this exact moment. Whereas like before, I felt like I was very much like floating about, like doing everything in the wrong order, not really preparing for these networking calls, not really knowing what to do for interviews. Like I had gotten an interview with Blackstone and like somehow gotten like to the final round, but I was like looking back, like now that I know, like, wow, that was such a horrible interview. Um, and also, I guess the final push too was I like managed to network with a banker at the Bank of America team, and like he decided that he really liked me and that he wanted to push for me. So I was like, okay, well, I don't know what I'm doing. I want to like be as prepared as possible for this. And I felt like Wall Street Mastermind was the best, I guess, place to do that and the best decision to make.
Yeah. So basically, you got close. Sounds like a couple of times, including Blackstone and other those. Even though you don't, in hindsight, knowing what you know now, you don't feel like you did very well. But like this time around with B of A, when you felt like there was a chance, you wanted to just make sure that you're giving it everything you got, and you're not leaving. You're not gonna like leave any room for regrets later because just like knowing, oh, I could have done more, or I could have got more help, or whatever, and I didn't, and so therefore I didn't get this opportunity. It's like you're just going all in, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
Gotcha. And your parents were, was that like, did you have to convince your parents, or was that an easy conversation, or were they like fully supportive, or were they like, what are you talking about? What is this?
I feel like I was really lucky. It was they were very supportive. Because I mean they had, I guess, tried to help me interview, but both of them are relatively pretty busy. And I think the recruiting cycle is constantly like changing, like it's getting earlier every year. And so I was just like, after I had initial call with Patrick, I was like, I think this is something that could really help me. And that was that was pretty much all the convincing that I needed.
That's awesome. That means your parents trust you. I mean, like we see this all the time. It's like a lot of students, they talk to us and then they really want to work with us, and then they all have to go talk to their parents, and then there's like usually two categories. There's like the kids that their parents really trust and know that they make good decisions, and those guys are usually relatively easy. And there's like the kids that, have been kind of dickheads their whole lives, and I probably shouldn't say that, but whatever. Like they've made a lot of bad decisions growing up, and their parents don't really trust them, and they're just like, "What is this? You're getting scammed or whatever," right? And they just don't really think that they actually know what they're doing, and that always makes the conversation a lot tougher. Um, so I mean that's great that they trusted you. So I guess so then you come in, right? Like you got your parents to support you. You come in, and then we start, obviously you didn't have a lot of time because it was really late January, and that sounds funny to say, but it was late January, but you didn't have a lot of time. Uh, because all the applications are already open, like interviews are already happening, right? So what were the things that you did then after joining, or like obviously we don't have to talk about like every single thing that we did together, but like what would you say are like the two or three most helpful or most impactful things that really moved the needle for you? Or like things that maybe really differed from how you were doing things before, which I don't know, based on what you were describing, sounds like it was kind of like a somewhat haphazard way of like, oh, I'm just, kind of don't know what I'm supposed to do, but you're doing things, but you don't know if you're doing the right things or at the right time. Like, so what changed, I guess, is probably the easiest way to ask that.
Yeah. So like immediately I just tried to go through like the videos as quickly as possible. Like I remember like I would just like be in my room and like whenever I had free time, like I would just like be playing my videos and like initially just getting that context and getting that structure really helped. I was like, okay, this is what I need to do like on my resume. This is what I need to be like, this is how I should be structuring my behavioral answers. And then for the technicals, like I was like, oh, okay, like now it's starting to click, just like getting like the context of, okay, like this is like how, like the three financial statements go together, like versus like I was just like reading, I was like, I remember I was reading the like the guide and I was like, what the heck is PP&E? Um, so just
Um,
like hearing the background really helped. And then second, I think being able to like have like live coaches versus just like looking up on the internet like oh like what should I be doing, like having actual like live support people who have gone through it before was super super helpful.
yeah,
I like to go to the office hours. I really love like attending the hot seats because hearing people structure their answers, I'm like okay, this is like how I should be structuring the answers and hearing different questions asked. And then lastly just the practice. So it's like before I had my interviews, like I was able to schedule like a bunch of mock interviews. And I think that really, really helped because it's like nothing ever beats like being in kind of like simulating as close to like that environment as possible. And then also just getting the feedback right away.
yeah, that's awesome. How many mocks did we do before your interview? I don't even remember.
I feel like I did like at least like three or four, like right like the week before and like a couple
Yeah,
like the weeks after, I think. So
yeah. And was that like, did that make a big difference, I guess, being able to do all those mocks like leading up right to the interview? Or like what, because obviously, you mentioned like the mock interview hot seats, which is, where you get to go and you're not necessarily the one being mock interview, but you get to watch other people mock. And obviously, I think that is helpful as well. To your point, being able to kind of benchmark yourself against other people. I think there's a lot of value there because most people when they prep, the majority of people out there they just like they know they might prep their answers beforehand and they know like, oh, these are the stories I want to use, but they don't really know how other people are answering similar questions, and so they don't really know if their answers are better or worse or average, or and at the end of the day, you're not like interviewing in a silo, you're interviewing against everybody else, right? And so I always tell people it's kind of like they're being graded on a curve, and most people don't know where they stack up on that curve, which is a problem, right? So I do think like that's why we do the hot seats, is so that you can get a better feel for where you still need to improve. Because a lot of times, I'm sure for you too, like when you hear other people's answers, sometimes you're like, oh, that answer is a lot better than mine, right? And then that is really valuable because when you're just practicing with yourself, all of your answers probably sound pretty good, right? Like,
Yeah.
because you have no frame of reference, right? And so I think like that is helpful. But like then I think doing the one-on-one mocks where you're actually the one being mocked, I think that's then like a completely different thing as well, and that also adds like a different kind of value than just watching other people. Would you say?
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. And then going back to like having the mock interviews, it's like again, like when you're hearing yourself rehearse, you're like, oh, this is great. And then they ask you a question, you're like, actually, I need to prepare a lot more. So it's like you initially have maybe, I don't know, like a sense of like false confidence, but like having the interviews, like I feel like through iterations really helps you to hone and get better at like whatever you're going to do next, essentially.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, feedback is so important, right? Because again, when you're just prepping with yourself, or even some people who like they'll prep with their friends, right? Or like their roommate or their classmate who's same year that's also going through recruiting, or maybe like an upperclassman that's 1 year above them that, has gotten a summer internship but maybe isn't working full time or hasn't ever worked full time yet. I'm not saying like you should do all of those things, by the way, but I'm also saying, in my experience and based on what all of our students have told us, typically the level of feedback that you're going to get from your peers is not going to be the same as the feedback you would get from a coach who's like a lot more experienced than you and who has actually worked for a while and has interviewed a lot of candidates. And that's just because usually like your roommate or your peers or even someone who's a year older than you, they maybe know about a similar amount as you, or they might be like one step ahead of you, but not by that much, right? And so it's hard to give super insightful feedback if the gap between you and the person giving the feedback is not that big, right? It's
Yeah.
just like you're playing golf. You're not gonna take golf lessons from someone who's just like, I don't know, like I guess what do you guys call in golf? Handicap, right? Like if
Yeah.
their handicap's about the same as yours, you're not gonna take lessons from them. Like that makes no sense, right? You're gonna take lessons from someone who's like in theory a lot better than you are, right? Because then they can actually point out the things that you're doing wrong that you could be doing better. And a lot of times sometimes it's like your friends don't want to hurt your feelings, so they're not gonna be like super critical with their feedback. But sometimes it's not even that. Sometimes it's like the answer actually sounds good to them too. And they're not trying to be nice. They're just like, yeah, it sounds good. And that's it, right? And then like you're not really improving when everything just sounds good and there's like no changes, right? So I think yeah, the mock interviews is super important. It's a big part of kind of our process here. Going back to something you said earlier though, on a technical side, because obviously you tried reading the 400 questions guide initial because that's just what people told you to do. By the way, I've done so many of these interviews, and a lot of people have that exact same experience, right? Because usually when you first start prepping and you ask around and you talk to the upperclassmen, you're like, how should I go about this? Do you have any advice? And then a lot of times it's like, read the 400 questions guide, like read this, right? Or they'll send you the file. Like, here's what I used.
Yeah, no, exactly.
And obviously like that didn't really click for you, right? You're like, what the heck is PP&E, whatever. But then this time around, you're like, oh, this is starting to click, right? This is starting to make sense. For people who haven't really experienced that, like, why is it so different? Why does it not click when you're reading on your own versus like when someone's actually teaching it to you, I guess.
Yeah. So I think for one, like specifically like the 400 guide, just the way that it's just like the questions and then the answers. So I feel like the way that it is, it's like very backwards, right? It's like they provide the answers of like someone who's already like gone through and knows the understanding of how everything works. Versus like the way like when I was like going through the modules, it's like you start at like a very high level overview, right? And I think like the first one that you go through is like this 2 hour thing of like speed run of like all these different concepts and having kind of just like the context for everything really, really helps because a lot of times the questions that they're answering or like they're asking you in interviews are like maybe not necessarily like the same questions. So like I feel like having like one way, like yeah, you could totally memorize that, but it's very brittle knowledge because you're not like necessarily able to apply it to like a different context versus like when you actually understand how things work. At least the way that like my brain works is like when I have like the underlying context and like more information, it's actually easier for me to piece together things and it makes it actually more likely for me to memorize like those terms, like how what does PP&E do and like where does it go like on the balance sheet or whatever.
Yeah,
Um, and so I think that's the main thing. And then also I think it comes across better in your interviews too when like they probably like I think every single kid probably had like the same answers and it's probably really boring so they like try to change it up and when you're like even if you're not necessarily able to directly answer the question, having the understanding and be able to ask like intelligent follow-up questions, I think really goes a long way.
for sure. I think you're right, and that is why our technical module is that way by design, which is like we wanted to give everyone a 30,000 foot view of here are all the concepts. Not like we don't get super into the weeds on like here's exactly how you calculate every single step in a DCF or whatever, but it's just like here are all the concepts you're gonna need to know, and here's how they all relate to each other, right? Like here's why you need to learn the three statements first, and then that feeds into valuation methodologies, and here's why you do valuation, and then like that allows you to determine, the value of a business, which is like the first thing you have to figure out when you're doing an M&A deal is how much is this company worth, right? And then like LBO from there is just like, M&A, a different type of M&A deal, but with like a more complicated capital structure. But like if you can first zoom out and be able to see the entire picture. It's kind of like when you're building a brand new puzzle, if you could see the box and see like, oh, this is the end goal, okay, that I'm working towards, versus if I don't give you a box and I just give you like 100 pieces and it's like, okay, go put this together. It's like I don't know what I'm working towards, and I don't know like how these things are related to each other, or oh, maybe this thing is next to this thing, this color and this color is next to each other because that's how they're positioned. Like that, this is how they're related. So I think like that makes it just easier to comprehend, right? And I think the other point that you make, which is a really good point, is don't get me wrong. Like people think I like hate the 400 questions guide or something. Like I think 400 questions guide is a great guide. It's like, obviously one of the best out there. But to your point, the way to use those guides is more as like a test bank or like as a way to quiz yourself once you feel like you understand the underlying concepts, right? And all of our students use those guides too. Like every single student in Wall Street Mastermind has read the 400 questions guide and the Wall Street Oasis guide and Wall Street Prep Rep book. And I mean, whatever other guys are out there, but it's like you go through the modules first and you learn the underlying concept. And then the way you test yourself to see if you actually retain the knowledge is to see if you can answer those questions, right? Whereas most people do it backwards and they try to like just memorize the answers to this question and they think that's learning, but you're not actually learning because you can do rote memorization, but you don't understand what you're memorizing. And I always tell people like the real test for whether you're actually understanding something like a new concept is can you turn around and teach it to someone else who's a total beginner? Like, can you explain it to your younger sibling who's never taken a finance class, for example? Right? Because if you can't explain it in layman terms to someone else, then you probably don't understand it well enough, right? And a lot of what we're doing to teach you guys in a technical module is also trying to explain it in layman terms, right? It's like before you talk about what a discounted cash flow is, you have to explain the time value of money, right? And like why a dollar today is worth more than a dollar tomorrow, right? And so it's like the more skilled or the more skilled you become at, or the more you start to understand certain concepts, the the better you're gonna get at like explaining it in a way that's easy to understand, right? And so that's like what we try to get everyone to, because that's basically what you're gonna be asked to do in an interview is almost like teach the interviewer about whatever topics they want to learn about. Except obviously they already know those topics, but that's what you're being asked to do, like verbally, right?
Yeah.
Um, so that's really helpful. I guess on the one more thing on the networking side. Did you, because you were obviously already networking before you came into Wall Street Mastermind, and obviously you continue to network after you joined as well. Did anything change with like your approach to networking, or like whether it's like the way you reach out to people or even the way you have the conversations, and like did you see any difference in terms of kind of the results that you got?
Yeah. I really liked the structure that's provided, kind of like the like ideas framework where I feel like prior to that, my networking calls were very much like jumping around. And I feel like I could sense like the people I was speaking to really didn't know like where I was going at. And then kind of like after having like that structure, like it was like, okay, like I was better able to like obviously I'd always recommend having like questions already like asked, but like, like having like a more natural flowing conversation. I think just like the way that that's structured helps really like facilitate that. And then I guess like in terms of like outreach or just like after I really like the email template actually like I mean I obviously like edited it a little bit to just like fit my voice better, but I think that really helped in terms of like having like a tighter like thank you or like even after like interviews just I guess like having like a better way to like end things. Um and then I would say I'm trying to like think of like more like tangible things in terms of networking versus me just feeling better after the call. But um I would say like part of the reason like that really helped me for like Bank of America was just being able to network with that one specific banker who was able to tell me about different deals and I was able to network with kind of like their staffer and hear more about like internally about the bank and I think that gave me better answers for like why am I interested in the like Bank of America and this specific team. Um but
And a lot of times, especially like for your situation, which, if we are correct, like it came down to you and probably someone else that were like neck and neck, right? And so like, and that was the case for me when I got my first full-time offer at Deutsche Bank too. Like, it was one spot because it was full-time recruiting. It was only one spot, and I don't know who told me afterwards, but it was basically down to me and another guy from UCLA, and we were like basically tied. And then we needed someone to like break the tie, basically. And then so in instances like that, where if you've networked really well and you have people in the group, whether it's a staffer or someone else, especially a staffer usually has a lot of power because they manage all the analysts. But if you have someone that really liked you from your networking conversation and they're willing to go to bat for you, that could end up being the tiebreaker, right? And that's really important. And I know you said it was like, hey, you know, more tangible things versus just like you feeling better after the calls. The funny thing is with networking, if you're feeling better after the calls, usually that means that the banker is also feeling better after the call, right? Like truly. And if you get out a call and you're like, oh, that call was so awkward, or oh man, like that was a struggle, like I had to like really try super hard to like keep the conversation from having awkward silences, then like you can almost be certain that the banker felt the same way, right? And these bankers are working so hard already and so many hours, during the week. And when they take like 30 minutes out of their day to talk to you, the last thing they want is to have to think really hard about how do I keep this conversation flowing and make it not be awkward. They want it to be like relaxing and enjoyable and almost be like a little break from, a very long and stressful day. And it's almost like they want to just be able to like, if you can make it feel like they're talking to a friend, then that would be a huge win, right? Because also, by the way, like, yes, you're there to get the referral, but the prerequisite to them referring you is they have to like you as a person. So if you can make them feel like you're their friend almost, I know this like sounds weird, but like if they felt like, oh yeah, like Kira's like really fun to talk to, like I could really see myself, you know, being in the bullpen with her for 80 hours a week or whatever, then ironically, you're going to be a lot more likely to, get what it is that you came for, which is that referral, right? Versus I think a lot of people try to be super robotic or super transactional about it. And you can feel that in the conversations, and nobody wants to feel used, right? Um, like they know why you're there, they know why you're talking to them, obviously, but still, like you have to make it enjoyable. So anyway, like you feeling good about it after a call is usually a good sign. Um, because yeah, sometimes it is hard to put your finger on it exactly, but a lot of it just goes back to the things you said. It's like if you got better flow, better structure, the conversation feels more effortless. Um, those are like the leading indicators that you're looking for, right? Um, So that's amazing. I guess I know we're almost out of time. So like the last question I really want to kind of ask you is now that you're on this other side and you have an offer, what is your best piece of advice that you will want to give to maybe other people who either are still currently recruiting or maybe will be recruiting at some point in the near future? Is there anything that you picked up along the way, whether it's from someone else or just from figuring it out on your own, but like anything you picked up along the way that you feel like really helped you a lot that you want to kind of tell other people?
I mean, the thing that comes to mind that is probably just like repeated over and over again, and I'm sure I heard that a lot in networking calls was just like the value of trying to talk to as many people as possible. Obviously, I would recommend being more prepared than I was like initially back in fall and be prepared for it to like turn into an interview. But I think nothing really beats speaking to actual bankers who have like the experience and whether or not like it, I mean, the team that you're on makes a big difference. So being able to speak to people at different teams, getting a feel for the culture, like, and asking, like what do they enjoy about their job, like what drives them. And I think that kind of helps you formulate, like why you may be interested in this job. Because a lot of times I was asked like, why are you interested in this and like what keeps you motivated? And I think having like you're able to better formulate that from speaking to people. And then I guess like a second thing that I would add is that's like kind of related is just like making sure that you have like a good why. And I think like it's talked about in the modules, but it's very, very difficult. And a lot of times you're like, I don't know if anything's gonna work out. So like just like keeping that front and center, I think really helps to like push through all of like the tough times.
Yeah, no, that is one of the first things we talk about in our program because just speaking from personal and a lot of like what goes into the program is kind of informed by my own experience, right? But I myself really struggled with recruiting, and there were many times when I thought I wasn't going to make it. Like I barely got a summer internship, but then when I did, then I didn't get a return offer, and I was like, oh my God, like this is game over, right? And then I re-recruited for full time without a return offer, and that was extremely hard. And I got rejected so many times, and even the Deutsche Bank offer, that was like basically the very last firm that I still had an interview with, and I was like, if I don't get this, then I guess I don't know what I'm gonna do. And then so I like barely just got in the nick of time, and even then it was like I was tied with the other person, like I said earlier, right? Like I had to kind of like you said, a little bit of luck always helps, but like so this close to just not making it in, right? And so I just think back to time when I was going through it, and there were definitely multiple instances where I was like, you have a lot of doubt. Just like, after the fifth rejection, the eighth rejection, the 10th rejection, I think I got rejected by like 20 something firms for so it's like, like you get beat up emotionally and you're like, maybe I'm not cut out for this, like that voice in your head, the self-doubt just gets gradually louder and louder. And I don't think I'm smarter than other people. I think I'm just like more stubborn and I just didn't quit because a lot of people would have quit after the fifth or eighth or 10th or 12th rejection. And it was just like, yeah, it's not meant to be, and I just didn't quit. And if I had quit on like the 20th rejection, then I probably wouldn't have gotten the offer, right? And I would have been like 3 feet away from gold. But to your point though, I think that's easy to say, hard to do. That's why it's
Yeah.
like you really have to understand what your motivation is, like intrinsically. And for me, that motivation was, like my parents and like they were immigrants and they had to work super hard and it wasn't always easy to just like give me the opportunities that I had, and I was like, I'm not gonna squander this, and like failure is not an option basically, right? And so like that was like not the entire reason, but that was part of my why. But I think everyone has to have something like that, and if or rather if you don't really have a good reason for why this is important, then in my experience, like chances are there's gonna be other people who have really good reasons, who are hungrier than you, and who are gonna outlast you. And it's just gonna be very hard to compete for something that's this competitive. So I think that's really, really good advice as well. Both in terms of like talking to as many people as possible, because you learn a lot from doing that, and also just even though it's not an interview, you're kind of getting reps in like a lower stakes environment for like the actual interviews and for how you tell your story. Um, but then also for, just knowing why you're doing this so that you don't give up along the way. So thank you for that.
Yeah,
And
there, can I actually add?
yeah,
So I guess like I think I would say like yeah, I agree with everything that you're saying. And one thing that was like kind of surprising to me is like likability really goes a long way. And I think part of that is just like genuine curiosity because as you said, I'm like they get so many networking calls, but like if you're actually like interested in what they do and who they are as a person, I think that really helps them want to kind of like go the extra mile for you.
yeah, that is one of the most important things actually to get the other person to like you is you have to be genuinely interested in them, not like just, oh, I'm here and I'm talking to this person because I have to or because I'm supposed to, even though I don't even know you and I don't really care about you, right? It has to, you almost have to trick yourself into like really being interested in who this other person is because every single person actually has like an interesting story behind them, believe it or not. But it's your job to like uncover what that is, right? And so yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's another great piece of advice as well. So um, but anyway, guys, like for those of you that are still with us, um, if any of this resonates with you, if maybe you've been going through recruiting on your own for a while, maybe you're reading the 400 questions guide, or you're maybe even already have some interviews and it's hasn't really panned out, and you know that there's more you could be doing, and you know that maybe you're close, but you just need to kind of get over the hump, and you don't want to have any regrets for like not doing everything within your power. Then I want to encourage you to reach out to our team. You can, first step would be to, just schedule a call with us. You can go to www.wallstreetmastermind.com/apply. The street's abbreviated to ST, so it's wallstmastermind.com/apply. And what we'll do is we'll hop on with you. We'll talk more about your situation. What is your current profile? Where are you at in the recruiting process and timeline? What are the banks that you're aiming for or hoping to get into? And what are the challenges that you feel like you're struggling with, right? And like everyone's gonna have a different situation, which is why it's important to like talk about it because there's no one size fits all approach. But based on what you tell us, if we feel like we can help you, we'll walk you through kind of what that might look like. And regardless of whether you actually let us help you or not, you can either work with us if you think that's the best course of action, or you could just take the advice that we give you and just go back and run with it on your own. Like that's totally cool too. Like we don't mind either way. Like we just want to help. And so I would encourage you guys to do that. All right. So with that said, Keira, I want to thank you for taking the time to kind of talk to us about your journey and your experience and especially since you're on spring break right now. Like I'm sure there's better things you could be doing, but but yeah, like super happy for you and huge congrats on an amazing offer. And obviously you came in the program in a very short amount of time, accomplished so much, and you worked super hard. Just like you said, like all of your free time went towards like, just cranking through all the things that you had to learn. And not everyone comes in with that sense of urgency and that work ethic. And so I think it was really great to see you have that. And, just super proud of you and excited for you. And looking forward to seeing what you accomplish at Bank of America next summer and really even beyond that. So,
Yeah. Thanks. I really enjoyed speaking with you. And as I mentioned, Wall Street Mastermind has really been a great help. So,
appreciate you saying that and appreciate you taking the time. So, guys, we're going to wrap it up here. All right. We'll be back with more of these for you guys in the near future. And hopefully, you guys found this helpful. And until next time. All right. Cheers.